Thank you for giving us this opportunity to
You're welcome.
speak to you about Kenya Airways, wonderful airline, pride of Africa. You recently were appointed to be the Chief Executive Officer. How has it been so far?
So an interesting journey. I think the first thing is that it's a pleasure and a privilege to be leading such an important airline. First of all, a big business in Kenya, but more importantly, also a business that's making a huge difference in Africa. So I lead it with passion and pride.
For those who don't know your journey, how did you start and end up being in Kenya Airways?
So in very simple terms, I trained as an accountant at University of Nairobi, joined Price Waterhouse, worked with PW, first in Kenya, moved to the UK to Manchester, chartered accountant, worked 5 years in the UK, back in Kenya with PW, then joined Bamburi Group in Kenya, in Mombasa as finance director, then moved to Uganda as managing director, moved to Lafarge Group, which is part of, which owns Bamburi or part owns Bamburi, in the group office in Paris, 3.5 years as group vice president for internal communications. From Mombasa, I went to Uganda as the CEO of Hima Cement, then moved to Paris. Then from Paris, moved to Tanzania as the CEO of the business in Tanzania, and then joined Kenya Airways 3 years ago as Chief Operating Officer. And in November last year, was appointed CEO.
It's been a journey. Wow. So now let's talk about you as a Chief Operating Officer. How long were you there for? And how was it like?
So big transition from cement into aviation space. I would say 2 or 3 main differences. First of all, the level of regulation in aviation industry is significant because there's rules and regulations that govern the operational process, and it's fantastic. In cement or in industry, yes, it's true, safety is there, and we really focus on making sure things operate in the same way. But aviation space has significant regulation. The second thing that I found was, which was truly different, was the fact that once the aircraft takes off, those are perishable goods. You will not see a stock out in industry, be it cement or others, over probably 2 or 3 weeks if there's a problem in the manufacturing process. But in aviation industry, you see the problems right there and you have to deal with them. I think the last thing, and which was for me a most encouraging thing, was actually both of these are businesses which have processes which are really process industry, and the measures are not dissimilar in terms of reliability, availability, efficiency and all. And that was very encouraging, and that's what I really capitalized on, because when you look at the aviation space, similar to cement, it's actually process and efficiency. And if you measure things, what gets measured gets managed. If you do things in the background on process, you will have a good, efficient process. Today, when you're a traveler, you only see the front end process, but behind there is men and women working hard. Every aircraft, we have 160 takeoffs and landings every day, and each of it is an operation which requires significant focus from the men and women involved in the process.
Yeah, that's huge. Sometime when I fly with these big planes, it's as big as an hotel. Yet all these people who are there, they have to eat, they have to be attended to, they have to be checked in, they've got luggage. So you are saying 160 takeoffs every day. That's a huge operation.
The process behind it is there are people who are responsible for making sure that turnaround of the aircraft happens. There are people responsible for offloading bags, loading bags. There's people responsible for making sure the food is brought into the aircraft or the aircraft is clean. There's people responsible for checking you in and making sure you're all on board. There's a whole security process. So there's a lot of processes that are flowing in terms of regimented behind, and we've got to make sure that those processes are well standardized and they're working efficiently to deliver the experience for you as a traveling guest.
Great. Now, as a Chief Executive Officer, at the moment, did you find it so different, or you settled and you kicked off? Or to rephrase, did your experience having been working for Kenya Airways help for the transition into the position you are in now?
Most certainly. I mean, the fact that I've been in Kenya with 3 years has allowed me to experience, to understand what the business is about. So the transition from that point of view operationally was positive. I worked very closely with the previous CEO, so to understand sort of the broader business. I think the big change is the fact that now I am responsible and making sure that I'm responsible for not only the fact that I'm the accountable manager, because the buck stops with me, but my focus areas around the financial part of the business and the commercial part of the business are much more things that are stretching me today. When you ask me what are the things that I'm focusing on today, I'm focusing on getting the adequate financial structure for the business. We are in a tight liquidity position today, but we've talked about, I've shared the fact that I've got a plan in terms of the raising the medium-term money that will allow us to actually bridge the short liquidity issues we have right now as we then go into the long-term financing process. From a commercial point of view, I've talked about the fact that I am focusing on finding the right commercial blend that will deliver the results for us, irrespective of the fact that we have a tight business environment because of the travel advisories and the terrorism risks that we have in our region.
Yeah, how has that affected the business?
Clearly, if I look at it from, say, London to Mombasa, over 3 years, business has halved. And that's because tourist arrivals from the UK are the largest tourist arrivals into Kenya. But be that as it is, I mean, we can't sit back and lament as a business. We're still flying the aircrafts, we are still flying into Europe. Therefore, we must find new alternatives to get passengers on board because we can't sit back and say, hey, listen, tourism is affecting us and all that. I think the narrative for me that we need to rewrite, and that's why I'm encouraged by being able to share my perspective to the UK market, is that only a small part of Kenya is affected by terrorism. In fact, if you look at it where the travel advisories are written, it's only parts of Mombasa and parts of Malindi and Lamu. The rest of the country is open for business, and I think that's part of the narrative that's not sufficiently shared. And we're encouraging a lot of people to consider the fact that they can do holidays or they can visit very many other parts of the country. And Mombasa will come back. It will definitely come back. It's a fantastic product. But there are still people today, even in the current context, that are still traveling to Mombasa. It's just that
there are people from UK with businesses there. They cannot shift just because they are travel advisors.
It's true. And I think the second part of the narrative that I would like to encourage the market to consider is that actually, when we stop to travel to some of these places, we are actually demonstrating to those who are the terrorists amongst us that they're winning.
Yeah.
Yet we've got to put up the bright face and say, hang on, we'll not be deterred by it. Look what happened in Paris after the terrorism attack. Exactly. People actually traveled more to Paris in solidarity.
Even Western leaders.
There you go.
Which is funny. I found it very funny. I don't know how you found it. The fact that when Kenya is a travel advisory, people don't go there. Yet in Paris, when there's an attack, even prime ministers, presidents from Europe, they all converge in Paris. They should have put a travel advisory there in the first place. I don't know what you thought about it.
I think without judging it, I think what you were saying is clearly that any country that is facing a challenge, today it will be Kenya, tomorrow it will be another country. I think the narrative around the fact that they actually need our support and our experience, because terrorism is a global phenomenon. And I think that's why my encouragement around the fact that only a small part of Kenya is affected by it. And number two, that actually we need to support those places, those businesses need our support.
Yeah, I quite agree with you. I can't agree with you more. But right now, the narrative that is out there from Kenya Airways, some of it hasn't been that great. What are you doing to change that?
From what perspective?
From some media reports about the economy, in terms of the financial aspects of the business, showing not really great. So and this is what I started to say a short while ago, that it's true we're in a tight liquidity position. It's it's not a secret. I announced a half-year result where we showed a loss. But the fact that a business is in the loss doesn't mean that it's actually not operating. We're still flying every day. We're still flying a strong network right across our African network and Middle East and Asia and into Europe. I think the point for me is that we stay focused. We stay focused on the end game. We have a liquidity challenge,
that liquidity challenge is we're finding solutions for it. Everybody, of course, will have their opinion from a media point of view on what could be done or should be done by Kenya Airways, and it's good. I mean, we are a publicly quoted company, so we are open to a lot of analysis and a lot of opinion in terms of what people would expect KQ to do. My focus is to run a business, and to run the business in the way that we have agreed with the board of directors and the shareholders, and to deliver the value for the shareholders long term.
Sure. And I think also to support what you're saying is that every business faces liquidity challenges. It's a business experience.
Aviation cycles, and you will see it all globally. The turbulence in the industry you'll find today. I mean, look, remember Egypt went through a huge challenge after the Arab Spring. Egyptian Airways grounded a lot of their aircraft. I think their saving grace was actually their fully owned business by the government. And you'll find other people go through the challenges. We have built an enviable network as KQ. KQ has fantastic footprint in Africa, has the best connectivity in Africa. KQ has fantastic connectivity in terms of just connecting different parts of the world today, and with the different partners that we have both in Europe and in Asia. And I think the other point, that the fact that we have modernized our fleet today. We're flying at 787 to Paris, to London. We're flying the 777-300 to Amsterdam. We've got brand new assets. We're now flying the 737NG, new generation -800. The modernization of the fleet therefore puts us in a fantastic position. We've rebuilt the airline from a fleet point of view. So we now have the fleet. We now have the fleet. We now have the improvement in the airport in terms of infrastructure, and the thing is really our effort to make sure that we can deliver even in tough times, despite the externalities that we have.
And this flight to Vietnam, which was recently launched, do you have a lot of a huge market there, or how is it performing?
The first thing is actually to just inform you that we've been flying to Vietnam for the last 4 years through the code share we have with Vietnam Airlines via Bangkok. And that's why we were encouraged by the fact that we've seen the numbers actually pick up from that code share to have a direct flight to Vietnam. Vietnam today has connectivity into Africa. We see a lot of traffic coming from Vietnam into Maputo and into Luanda. And that's the encouragement. And then there's secondary traffic in terms of Vietnam government traveling into different parts of Africa. So Hanoi is actually replacing some parts of China today as a next trading bastion in terms of manufacturing and trade into Africa. So we also have the point for us to open up new markets, and that was part of the perspective that the reason why we went into Hanoi.
Okay, brilliant. And these partnerships between airlines, how do they work? Like, for example, Kenya Airways, KLM, SkyTeam.
So if we separate the different things, the first one is KLM is a shareholder of Kenya Airways. KLM got involved in Kenya Airways in 1996 when the government privatized Kenya Airways. And so KLM is probably, KQ was the first privatized airline in Africa. So that's when KLM got involved. Over and above them being a shareholder, we have what is called a joint venture between Europe and Africa and Eastern Africa, and that means that we operate our routes in common, and we put all our revenues and costs together, and we share the benefits or the losses. That's the first thing. We also have what are called code share arrangements. A code share means that you're actually sharing your flight access. So you can fly, for example, from here, London via Nairobi to Lusaka on what is called a code share, because you are sold on one ticket, connectivity through Nairobi, your bags are checked in, and the way we share the revenues of the routes, it depends on who is the flying carrier. There's also an arrangement called a special prorate agreement, which are used for airline industry, where you don't have necessarily a partner, you don't have a code share, or you're not in a joint venture. For example, today we sell tickets on Etihad from Nairobi through Abu Dhabi to Pakistan, and because we have an arrangement with them on a special prorate agreement, so we share the revenues on those routes. You asked about SkyTeam. SkyTeam is an alliance of airlines, not dissimilar to One World or to Star Alliance. SkyTeam brings together 20 airlines globally to make it simpler and easier for you to travel within the network. So we share common lounges, we have common standards, a lot of us are code sharing with each other, and we fly into each other hubs to create that hub and spoke and increasing the penetration of traffic. So today we have code shares with a lot of our SkyTeam partners, and it allows you to fly to something like 990 destinations around the world. SkyTeam today, we cover more than 85 to 90% of the global destinations there are. So that's the sort of network. You cannot do everything alone. Benefits. Yes, you cannot do everything alone. So today, when I tell my staff, when you come to my office, you can say, you ask me, do you fly to Australia? No, we do not. But through the partnerships we have, we fly to Australia. So I'm able to sell you a ticket Nairobi to Australia.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, flights happen between different countries. The question is, of course, and as you mentioned earlier, there is high regulation of the aviation industry. Does that regulation at some point affect your revenue generation?
Definitely. Regulation always has an implication in terms of how you operate. If I look at the EU regulation, I believe you're familiar with the delayed compensation arrangement on the EU, which for me is an unpleasant surprise, because it seems that airlines are seen as deep-pocketed. It's only airlines where you delay. When you have a delay of more than 3 hours, you have to pay compensation. We don't see the same with bus companies, we don't see the same with ferries, we don't see the same with train. But airlines, because they're seen as presumably the EU regulation sees them as deep-pocketed, you actually have that. That's an additional cost. And yet delays will happen for different reasons, because we are working with equipment where safety is the number one priority.
Yeah.
The other regulation cost that you actually see is in the civil aviation space sometimes, or a passenger services cost, or airport costs. And those things have a cost implication sometimes that has to be passed on. You remember when, because of increased security, there were security levies that were being increased in certain regions. Yeah. So you have to pass that cost on to some of your customers. Yes.
Yeah. And in the entirely, it can also affect the profitability of an airline.
Correct.
I just want you to talk to Kenyans in the diaspora, people who fly from the diaspora, those who might maybe have had a negative narrative going their way. What will you convince them to know, hey, it's a time to fly with the pride of Africa?
So the first thing is, and I know that people have choices in terms of travel, and that's the first thing, and that's a beautiful thing about having competition, because competition brings choice. What I have to do is convince people that, first of all, I have the customer service to deliver to the team. I have the aircrafts and the product that actually can, and I have the price proposition that allows you, and in terms of speed and access. I think from a customer service point of view, my big ask of my team, which we are focusing on writing in KQ, and which is a big mantra, is that we will own the space of being warm, caring, friendly, and truly African. Because we know we are, and we know that we are the pride of Africa, because we see the difference we make right across Africa. If you travel across Africa, because we provide the largest connectivity across Africa, there are countries which actually rely on KQ as their national airline, and there's a pride of place to do that. Sometimes in Kenya, we forget that actually Kenya Airways makes a difference in terms of the economic connectivity of our country, and the fact that a lot of companies actually position themselves in Kenya because of that. So the first thing for me is about, how do I drive my people and my teams to manifest that customer essence that we actually can generate, and we can drive as a Kenyan public. And that's my first proposition. And that's a space I want to own, and that's a space I encourage my staff to drive. The second thing is that from a product point of view, today we are right up there with the world's best. If you look at what we fly into London, 787 aircraft, brand new, spanking new, with the latest equipment on board. 777-300 into Amsterdam, 787 into CDG. So for the whole network of people coming from Europe or the US connecting via Europe, you no longer have the excuse that KQ is flying old planes. I think the third thing is that we have to be competitive from a pricing point of view, but pricing also have the colliery that actually you must book in advance, because part of our challenge we see with particularly in Kenya, we have a lot of late booking market, but the commitment of people, traditionally you will see that the European markets tend to book much earlier than the African markets, and I think always you will get a better price when you book earlier than when you book later, and that's part of the revenue management process. And my encouragement to people is always make sure that you book earlier. Overall, I would say that from a owning and aspiring to have your own, the one thing that I encourage, and we're talking a lot even in Kenya with government, with Kenyans, and engaging them in the social platforms and other platforms, is that we must also be proud of what we have as a country, because even as a country we punch way above our weight, and our airline today, it's actually the envy of many, and we must be proud of what we have, because we are punching way above our weight. And my encouragement to people is, let's be proud of our own. When you make mistakes, if we make mistakes, point them out to us, but also support us in the process, because we can't do this on our own. We can only do this together.
It's quite true. It's quite true. So perhaps in the next 5 years to come, what are your aspirations? Or if you're gonna have to be following your legacy within Kenya Airways, how far will you have taken? Do you have any immediate things you really focus on to bring a turnaround?
So the first thing, as I told you, is a financial turnaround. We have work to do in terms of making sure that our financial structure is solid and secure. That means both from a refinancing point of view, but also from a commercial point of view. And that is why the Kenyans in the diaspora, Kenyans back home, need to support the business, because that way we can both grow together. And we can have an airline that actually not only serves Kenya, but serves Africa. I think the second thing that it's a big focus, as I've told you, is on the customer experience and the customer service. And that's a legacy issue for me, because we must be able to provide the service that is solidly resilient, very efficient, but also a truly Kenyan experience, which is uniquely Kenyan. And that's a balance we have to drive.
I think, is there anything else you may want to add?
I think the opportunity to have a chat with people in diaspora is fantastic. The fact that we have access to be able to share our aspirations, to be able to share our ambitions, but also to share the challenges we face. No business goes through to success without going through the coals and without having those birthing pains. But what I am sure of is that Kenya Airways is an important and an integral part of Kenya, and of East Africa, and of Africa. And I am proud to be leading men and women in Kenya Airways right across our network, not only in Kenya, but right across the network. I have over 4,000 staff who I'm proud to lead every day, who are doing a fantastic job in delivering that service. And that's part of the commitment. That's what brings me to work every day, because I know they serve with pride and passion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
For your time.
Thank you very much,
Really
and pleasure meeting you. Yes. Thank you.